Hey guys, how y'all doing? Time to bring some focus to your favorite and not so favorite geeky films. Cam here, and welcome back to Cam in Focus. Before we get started, be sure to smack that subscribe button right in the face so you can stay up to date with geeky news and discussions. Geek News Now takes pride in being a reliable source of media news so that we don't keep getting hounded by clickbait. So hit that subscribe button and follow us on social media to join our family. And also, just as a reminder before we get started, Metallic Dice Games, code GNN, 10% off.
Do it now!
Let's get right to it. Okay, so I'm just gonna get this out of the way. I really love The Last Jedi. Yeah, I know, some people don't like it, and that's fine. I've heard every argument, and I understand where a lot of people are coming from, I just don't agree. Don't worry, this isn't gonna be one of those hour-long videos ranting about how someone's right or wrong. If you've been following my series for a while, you know that I try to stay as positive and as neutral as I can for the sake of my love for the franchise. And today, I'm gonna be discussing who most people agree is the best thing about the sequel trilogy, Kylo Ren. I truly believe that The Last Jedi gives us the best portrayal of Kylo Ren by far. We really get the opportunity to get into his head with great dialogue scenes that don't focus on heavy-handed exposition like in The Rise of Skywalker, where he basically had nothing but exposition as dialogue. Adam Driver gives a great emotional as well as physical performance to the character that, in my opinion, truly stands above and beyond the other two entries in the sequel trilogy. So this video isn't going to be so much of an analysis as my previous ones. What I'm going to do is just bring to attention a few topics within the film that I feel don't get talked about enough. Let's go. Something I love about Kylo Ren in this film is that, unlike his grandfather, he's a villain with something to prove. He wants to rise above and beyond the legacy that he has inherited. But he, after his opening scene, knows that he can't do that under Snoke. Adam Driver presents us with a character that comes off as simultaneously unhinged and extremely vulnerable. Just in his first few lines of dialogue, we know that Snoke considers his simple devotion to the dark side to not be enough, despite Ren's insistence that he did what he had to do for the dark side.
I've done everything I have to the dark side.
When Snoke tells him to take his mask off, we don't see the clean, confident Kylo Ren that we saw after his unmasking in The Force Awakens. This time he's battered and beaten, with a ghastly wound on his face that looks haphazardly sutured. His hair is frayed, he looks sweaty and grimy, and he looks like he hasn't slept. Right away we can tell that his confidence and resolve is gone, that he's been shamed and embarrassed, and I honestly find that incredibly endearing. Something that really speaks to how manipulative Snoke is when he says this line.
You wonder why I keep a rabbit cur in such a place of power. A cur's weakness, properly manipulated, can be a sharp tool.
It can be debated whether he says that about Hux, as is implied, or if he's saying this to Kylo about Kylo in a very underhanded way. I'm honestly inclined to believe the latter, because he talks about manipulation and immediately follows it up with his jab at Kylo about not living up to Vader.
A new Vader. Now, I fear I was mistaken.
More than likely to see what he'd do. To me, this is the start of what Snoke talked about in his last scene in The Force Awakens.
It is time to complete his training.
One particular part of the scene that I want to bring attention to is his scene in the elevator when he shatters his mask. There's no transition from the throne room to the elevator, and Rian Johnson keeps the camera angles in the same orientation as they were earlier, giving us the impression that even though his position within the scene has moved, he's still stuck within the walls of Snoke and of himself. When Kylo Ren punches his helmet into the wall, one could almost imagine Snoke still standing in front of him. To me, this is a fantastic foreshadowing of Kylo's betrayal near the end of the film. And speaking of foreshadowing...
You're not doing this, the effort would kill you.
And I love that he allows his anger to get the better of him, spurring him to get into his fighter to assault the Resistance fleet. He very easily could have single-handedly destroyed them too, had his mother's love for him not stopped him in his tracks like it did in The Rise of Skywalker. Once again, we see the conflicted Kylo Ren who's torn between his family and his legacy. From then on, we don't really see him do very much until the end of the third act, except for his dialogues with Rey. And I honestly love them. Through those scenes, we know that he doesn't have all the answers and is just as hungry for knowledge and his own idea of self-betterment as Rey is. While much of his mentality isn't stated outright, the implications behind what he says and the way he brings subtle nuance to the character says so much more than any kind of expository jibber-jabber ever could. One of my favorite smaller exchanges is at the beginning of their second dialogue sequence. Rey immediately goes on the offensive.
Why is the Force connecting us? You and I.
Murderous snake! You're too late. You lost. I found Skywalker.
Any other villain would have followed that up with some kind of monologue about how it's pointless, the Resistance is doomed, blah 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 blah. Instead, he asks her,
Did he tell you what happened?
and she seems genuinely taken aback by that. Like that's the first crack in her perception of him as...
You are a monster.
When she says that, it almost seems more like she's trying to convince herself rather than him. I understand that some people take issue with Luke's hand in Ben Solo turning to the dark side. I expand on that a little in my Return of the Jedi video, which I'll leave a link to below. One thing I do like about that particular story thread though, is not only the 3 conflicting versions of the story and the half-truths told by people who seek Rey's approval, but I like the inversion by means of the hero making the mistake and the villain believing his response to that mistake was justified. It shows us that both characters are flawed and imperfect, which does a lot to humanize them, and it gives an interesting dynamic to Luke and Ben Solo's relationship, which was expanded on in the Rise of Kylo Ren comic series. It also shows us that the dark side is much more than just the doing of evil deeds. It's a line of thought that attacks the mental weaknesses of the subject and feeds on their fear. Kylo Ren was afraid of not living up to the Skywalker legacy, and Luke was afraid that his vision of the future would come to pass. In my opinion, it plays very well into who they are as characters, and it forces us to understand that the light and dark aren't always as black and white as the old Jedi Order would have had you believe. And their strained relationship comes to a head in the climax of the film, and in my opinion, it's one of the best and most beautiful scenes in the sequel trilogy. The way it's shot with epic wides that really bring to focus the grand scale. The vibrant red and white of the ground against the pastel colors of the Krayt sunset. Luke being a badass, I just love it. The last thing I want to talk about is the throne room brawl. Yes, not duel, brawl. Not only is it one of the most well-filmed battle scenes in the Star Wars saga, the camera refusing to cut away so we can get epic long shots like this one. It's honestly the only time that we see Kylo Ren really fight for his life. Yeah, he lost to Rey in The Force Awakens, but it wasn't until the very end that he struggled even a little. And his fight with the Knights of Ren was only very briefly one-sided until he got his lightsaber and brutalized them all. In this fight, you really get the feeling that he's struggling, and unfortunately, it's one of the only times he does. Kylo Ren is truly my favorite thing about The Last Jedi. He's a flawed character who's desperate to grow out of the shadow of his inheritance, and his dialogue with Rey does a lot to humanize him and bring him down to our level. I just wish The Rise of Skywalker followed up on the themes set up in this film, but I'll get to that next time. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. I hope you enjoyed my little rant about Kylo Ren and maybe even learned a thing or two about him. I'll be back next month with my Rise of Skywalker commentary, so look forward to that. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and follow us on social media to join our family. Links for it all in the description below. This has been Cam in Focus, proud to be part of the Geek News Now network. Have a wonderful day and may the Force be with you.